Hey there, everyone. Welcome back to, I guess, the mystery of the disappearance of Liam Kent. Um, in case you're just tuning in now, this is the second in what proves to what's looking to be a pretty lengthy series of investigations. Um, I'm going to break character for a second just to sort of get you oriented because I do have a couple of items of business. First of all, this is going to be a pretty short stream. Um, I have some things I have to do this evening involving being a father, and so I'm going to be probably recording for about an hour now and then come back in later in the evening. But I wanted to get a head start. Also, I've got my new setup. I've got my new Logitech C922, and I've got it set up with my new crane. Get sort of a bird's eye view of the whole scenario, and but we're still figuring things out. So just like I've said before, bear with me. Still figuring out sort of the technological aspects. There might be a few hiccups here and there. And I wanted to mention I added some tags to the stream. First of all, I put this in the board game category. I'm not quite sure what the best category is for this. It is not technically a board game, but it functions very similar to one of those, I guess, escape the room style board games. It is an immersive puzzle solving experience, mystery solving, puzzle solving experience. So I'm going to be treating it as such. I'm going to be try to remain mostly in character for most of the rest of the recordings. I know I wasn't really in character for the first one, but I'm going to try to be a little bit more immersive for the rest of them. So I did add a role play tag to this stream, and I added the spoilers and persistent campaigns. Spoilers is going to be very important if you want to experience Hunt a Killer horror, the Blair Witch for yourself. You will be getting the entire thing spoiled by watching the stream because this is very narrative driven and puzzle solving experience. Not really something that you can watch somebody else do it and then have the full experience for yourself. So there's definitely going to be spoilers coming in, but if you want to sort of see what it's like and maybe you're interested in one of the other Hunter Killer products, or maybe you want to jump into a later season of Hunter Killer horror, this would probably be a good thing to watch. And I also added the persistent campaign. I'm a little iffy on that one, but this is going to be a story that's going to play out over at least 6 sessions, possibly more. So I got a few emails after the last session. So I'm going to sort of show this to you here. Let me see. So this one, really the only important detail here is that it says that I have completed the first episode of 6, and once I complete all 6, I will unlock season 2. So it's not clear. I haven't really done any research into it, whether season 2 is more Blair Witch or if it's going to be some other topic. But there's, like I said, there's going to be at least 6. Also, I got this nice email from Hunt a Killer saying that if you go to Target, you can get a standalone board game experience that's very, very similar to these subscription boxes that they do, called Murder at the Motel. And I believe I was looking at Target, and I believe there are actually 2 different games of this style that they have. One of them is Murder at the Motel. The other one is something like Death at the Casino or something like that. I'll look it up. So you can get If you like what you see here, you can get a game at Target that's a very similar experience. I think it's about $30 for the box. It's a pretty reasonable price. And it's fully enclosed sort of standalone experience. And then that was all. And then I'm going to get into character now. So let's take a little deep breath and before we get into character. All right. Welcome back. So we're going to be looking into the disappearance of Liam Kent again. After the last stream last week, I heard from Liam's mother again. I received another envelope in the mail, and then I also received an email from her, forwarded from her, from this super neutral newsletter. And I remember from the last letters that Liam was a fan of this super neutral show. So I'm going to read that to you now. It's in my emails here. Thanks for signing up for the Super Neutral newsletter. This month we're obsessing over the terrifying story of the Blair Witch. Legend has it that in 1817, the Bell family of Robertson County, Tennessee, found themselves the targets of a phantasm. It all started when the patriarch of the family, John Bell, fired his gun at what he thought was a ghostly dog. Other members of the family claimed to have seen various specters, such as enormous birds, and even a young girl swinging from the limbs of an old oak tree. The haunting of the Bell family quickly escalated, with the mysterious shape-shifting force scratching at the children, pulling their hair, causing John's mouth to become paralyzed. Perhaps this was a punishment for attempting to shoot the ghost. Eventually, the unseen specter started to audibly answer questions. Upon being asked, "Who are you and what do you want?" the ghost replied, "I am a spirit. I was once very happy to have been disturbed. I was once very happy, but have been disturbed." It claims its intent was to kill John Bell, which it eventually accomplished. In 1820, at 70 years old, Bell died. At his funeral, the Blair Witch, as she came to be known, interrupted the ceremony by gleefully singing drinking songs. "Oh, what would you do with a drunken sailor?" The story of the Blair Witch has spread far and wide since, commanding the attention of believers and skeptics alike. For more on the Blair Witch, including her relationship to none other than the United States President himself, listen to the Super Neutral podcast right here. So we've got a mini-sode that takes me to a mini-sode of the Super Neutral podcast, which looks like it's only about 3 minutes. And then there's a previous episode as well about the Blair Witch. Let's listen to this, I think. We're going to listen to the story of the Blair Witch right now.
Welcome to Super Neutral, the pint-sized paranormal podcast that pits a believer, that's me, Ed Barrett,
against a skeptic, that's me, James Durant.
On this minisode, we're going to talk about the legend of the Blair Witch.
Not to be confused with the Blair Witch.
Exactly. Maybe I just have Blair Witch on the brain, but I'd always heard people compare these two legends, and I just had to find out why.
Well, why don't you go ahead and tell the people about the Blair Witch?
Now, the Blair Witch is a name given to an entity that haunted the Bell family in the early 1800s. What I wrote in the newsletter was mostly about the father, John Bell, but now I want to focus on his daughter, Betsy.
Okay.
You see, Betsy has an equally fascinating connection to the Blair Witch. There are some who say that the witch only targeted John after he attempted to shoot it with a gun. But the paranormal activity was mostly focused on Betsy.
All right. And why would that be?
Glad you asked. I have a theory.
Of course you do.
What do you think you know about poltergeist, James?
What do I think I know?
Mm-hmm.
Why? Are you about to prove me wrong?
I am.
Great. Well, poltergeists can throw stuff. They can interact with the physical world. Am I wrong?
Nope, that is all correct. But what you didn't mention, and what I didn't know until recently, was that poltergeists are said to draw their power from children.
Come on.
It makes sense, James. Children have so much more energy than adults, and who would be a better source of poltergeist powering youth energy than an anxious, angry teen?
So what? Betsy was fueling the Bell Witch?
Maybe she was powering the Bell Witch. Oh, and over in Maryland, just a couple decades prior, the children created the Blair Witch.
Interesting. Well, maybe both the Blair Witch and the Bell Witch are metaphors for adolescence. Maybe people invented the concept of a poltergeist and a vengeful witch as a reaction to the hormones that cause children to behave with intense emotion at the drop of a hat.
Or maybe people invented the concept of a poltergeist and a vengeful witch to explain the actual supernatural phenomena they experienced.
Excellent argument.
Did you know that President Andrew Jackson came face to face with the Bell Witch? The story goes that Jackson was traveling to visit the Bell family with a few companions when the witch halted his cart on the perimeter of the Bell's property. When Jackson finally managed to move his cart and get to the Bells, she appeared to him again later that night, taunting him and his companions, daring them to try to shoot her. One of them tried, and she beat the living hell out of him and threw him out of the house.
That is a great story. But I've already looked into it. The only evidence that Jackson ever visited the Bells in the first place, let alone met a witch when he was there, is a letter written in 1894 by a man named Thomas Yancey, who described all of this as an amusing story his grandfather told him.
You know fun, James. You know that? Thank you all so much for joining us. We hope you learned something interesting and had a good time doing it.
We'll see you in the next minisode. But until that time comes, it's safe to turn out the lights.
Or is it?
Okay. Very interesting. I feel like I learned nothing about the Bell Witch, although I have heard that theory about poltergeists before in none other than the original Silent Hill video game. Also mentioned that specifically that poltergeist activity has been historically associated with adolescent girls. All right. So I received that email from Rosemary. And then, as I mentioned, I also received another envelope from her. So I've got some of the contents of the first envelope here sort of spread out in case I need them. I remember last time, if you recall, we found a few hidden messages on here using this blacklight pen. Let's pull these up, see if I can get that to show. It might not show up due to the contrast, but rest assured there are some hidden messages on there. And I was not actually able to decipher those codes last week. So I'm going to take another crack at it this week. And then I've also got my map of the village of Burkittsville here in case I need to reference that. And Liam's journal, and then the first letter from Rosemary, although I doubt I'm going to need to reference that. And I've got the first envelope handy as well. I've labeled it with a handy-dandy sticky note in case I need to access any other materials. But I've also got a new envelope. So just got this one, well, actually a couple of days after the last recording. If you remember last week, we were trying to figure out where Liam was heading because his mother, Rosemary, thought that if we could figure out where Liam was going before he disappeared, that would be a start to figuring out what happened to him. And we found out, spoilers, that he was actually heading to this building, the Burkittsville what was it called? The History Museum, right? Yeah, the Burkittsville History Museum. And in fact, that there is a sort of hidden basement in the Burkittsville History Museum where Liam was hanging out a lot and accessing sort of records of the history of the town. If you also recall last week, spoilers, we found out that Liam's dad was killed by a mysterious force. A tree randomly fell on him in the woods. And ever since then, Liam has been kind of obsessed with the idea of these supernatural forces that supposedly inhabit the woods of Burkittsville, or the woods around Burkittsville, the former town of Blair. And we learned a little bit about the Blair Witch, but mainly we just sort of figured out, okay, Liam has been going to this place. He's trying to research more about the history of the town. He's had some altercations with people at his school. And I remember that there was a tuna fish sandwich involved. So we'll see if that comes up again. We got a whole new package to go through. So what I think I'm going to do, as I mentioned earlier, I'm not going to be able to sit down and devote the entire evening to this, but I want to get a little bit of a head start on it. So I think I'm going to unpack the materials and start going through them now, but I don't think we're going to actually solve the puzzle until later this evening. So let's see what we've got here. Okay. A new letter from Rosemary. Let's see. Detective. After going so long without any leads, finding Liam's things in the basement of the History Museum has filled me with so much hope, so much fear in equal measure. As wonderful as it is to have found something of his, I can barely bring myself to look at the second set of handwriting that's scrawled all over his papers. Who is talking to Liam down there? What the hell did they say to him? It's nauseating to think about my son down in the cold and the dark being fed poison by some manipulative creep. When I was in that basement, something felt wrong about the place to me. It felt like I was being watched the entire time. When I went to pick up Liam's things, I swear that I felt something on the back of my neck, almost like a hand brushing against me. There was nobody there when I turned around, of course, but it almost gave me a heart attack. Once I pulled myself together, I showed the sheriff everything you helped me find. But just like every other time I've tried to get him to do his damn job over the past few months, Lanning told me the evidence wasn't sufficient to justify putting more resources into Liam's case. Not only has the sheriff flat out refused to start organizing any more search parties to comb through the forest, he didn't even process anything from the basement as evidence. He left everything I found with me. He told me to be thankful to have a few new mementos of my son, some things that I could keep close. If he thinks I'm going to sit back and let this happen, he's got another thing coming. I'm sending you everything that I found down there and more. Try to pay special attention to the notes with those symbols on them. When I say that they're strange, I don't just mean that because I can't make heads or tails of them. Whenever I try to look at them for too long, I feel a sharp pain in my temples. And something happens to my vision. The symbols start to look as though they're moving, crawling around the page like insects. I don't know how to explain that. I guess I'm tired. I haven't been sleeping well. Hopefully you'll have more luck with them than I did. The notes aren't all that was down there, though. There's something in Liam's pencil case, something that I think you need to see for yourself. There was also something from Hudson in that basement. I have no idea how it found its way down there, no idea at all, but reading it was like a punch in the gut. I also asked Anthony if anything strange had been happening at the museum recently. He made me promise that I wouldn't call him crazy, and gave me a few reports of odd incidents from the week before Liam went missing. He didn't show them to Lanning during the initial investigation because he knew that the sheriff is even less open to suggestions of the supernatural than I am. To be clear, I'm still extremely leery of the notion, but I can't ignore any possible explanation at this point. At the end of the day, among all of this strangeness, we know two things for sure. Someone was talking to my son in that basement, and we need to find out who it was. I need you to find the name of the person Liam was talking to. Send it to me through the tip line at kentcase.com. I've updated the password to ensure that all this new information stays secure. The new password is quietly5. We finally got a concrete lead. Let's make the most of it. Rosemary. All right. So, sounds like there's a lot of stuff to go through. Let's see what else is in here. Okay. I think these must be the letters that she was talking about. Let's see. Yeah. I can barely bring myself to look at the second set of handwriting that's scrawled all over his papers. Who was talking to Liam down there? What the hell did they say to him? I think that must be what she's referring to here. And then see what else is in here. More papers. This must be the ones from the dad, Hudson. She says, there was also something from Hudson in that basement. I have no idea how it found its way down there. No idea at all. But reading it was like a punch to the gut. So, just do a quick handwriting match here. I'm pretty sure, yeah, that's Liam. Actually, these pages might have come from this notebook. And then this is Hudson, Liam's dad. All right, so we've got that. What else have we got? Let's see. She said she asked Anthony, and he gave her some reports from things that have been happening at the museum lately. I think that must be this. So we've got a couple of incident reports from the Burkittsville History Museum. And then a feedback form as well from the History Museum. Let's see. Let's go through them, I think, in this order. We've also got, looks like a pamphlet from the History Museum. I wonder if there's any secret notes on this. What we discovered last week is that Liam, actually, the ink on this pen is invisible ink that shows up under a black light. So I would be very surprised if there were any hidden messages on here, unless this came from Liam himself. Let's see if we can find anything. Oh wow, yeah. Yeah, there's more writing on here. I don't know if I can make this visible. You see that? Look at that symbol. And then it looks like there's a note completely in code here. That I don't think is showing up very well, but it looks like to be very similar to the cipher used in these letters here. And, and there's another note there. Like there's some trees here sketched. It's definitely Liam. And another message up here. We wish that it showed up better. All right, so we've got something from the History Museum. Did she even mention that in her letter? I don't know, maybe it was just with Liam's stuff and that's why she sent it. I can't imagine she found the invisible ink on it. And then lastly, she said there's something I need to see in Liam's pencil case. There's definitely something heavy in here. Should I open it? Let's see. That's incredibly disturbing. And there's a note on here. I don't know if you can see, but looks like there's carvings on here in that same sort of cipher. All right, so we need to figure out what the hell is happening here. I'm going to put this away so I don't have to look at it. And we'll put it way far away up here so we don't have to look at it. But let's see, what does she want me to do? Find the name of the person Liam was talking to. Seems straightforward enough, right? We'll see. Okay. How do I find that? Where to even start? I think I need to start with these letters from Liam. So let's see. I know you're out there. I see you in the forest all the time, and I bet that you're watching me leave this note for you right now. Who are you? Come on. This note's been on the path for days. There's no way you haven't seen it. Answer me, or I'll call the cops, tell them there's a weird man following me. Answer, or I'll stop coming out in the woods. And get some weird symbols. What does that mean? Okay, so that took me forever to work out, but I think I get it now. So he's responding in the same cipher. I don't know how I will ever figure this out. I think he was, or at least I hope so. You know, I thought you were him at first. I'd see you in the forest out near where it happened, and think about all the stories there are about this place. There's tons of evidence that time and space don't work out here, like they do everywhere else. Even my dad would say so sometimes. Plus, I mean, if people can vanish so easily in the forest without any explanation, why shouldn't they reappear too? They almost never find bodies when people go missing, even when they search for months and months. I figured that might mean that people who die in the forest don't really die. I guess I was wrong, though. That's a very interesting theory, Liam. I wouldn't be so quick to discount it. You know my name? Does it frighten you that I do? I mean, yes. But at the same time, you've had about a million chances to attack me or murder me or whatever since I've come out here alone pretty much every day for the past few years. You haven't done any of those things, though, which makes me think you might not be out to get me. But then, what are you doing? Who are you? I had more of an absence than a presence. You're not the Blair Witch? Okay. Start on this cipher. This looks like the word no, right? Sometimes I kind of go numb and then just sort of act without thinking. Other times a thought pops into my head that feels like it's not even mine. Is that her? It happens the most often when I'm out walking in the forest. How long have you been out here? As you said, time works differently in the forest. How did you get that? That note was written before I was born. It should be nothing but pulp by now. As you said, time works differently in the forest. It really does? Things that should be gone are still out there? You know, I heard your mother the other night. Your house is close enough to the forest's edge for me to listen in. She sent you to your room like a child, all because you spoke your mind. She doesn't like when I talk about him like he's still alive. She says it's unhealthy. She doesn't get that the real unhealthy behavior would be to give up on him if there's any chance he's still out there. Is he? Is my dad out in the woods? Please just tell me. You know, he wasn't able to finish his last words to you before he choked on his own blood. But what he wanted to say was, thank God that you're all right. How do you know that? I'm connected to this place and everything in it. Okay, fine. Please help me find him. I'll do anything. I require no payment besides the satisfaction of reuniting a family. Whenever you're ready. Somehow, we've got to figure out what this cipher is and crack it. Liam appears to be very good at these kinds of things, and it said it took him a while. Not feeling very optimistic about my chances, but we've got to try. And then here we have, now this one looks a lot more reasonable. Because if you look here, I don't know why I'm turning it upside down. If you look here at the bottom, we've got symbols in a different cipher. But just immediately looking at that, I'm thinking it's got to be related, right? I think I've seen this cipher before. So if I'm remembering it correctly, it's basically like if you draw this shape, like a reverse L, that's an A. And then like this one is a B, C, etc. And it's got to be what this is, right? But I'm not quite sure of the details. I might be able to look this up and see Because I know this is an actual common cipher that exists. Okay. So let's look at these letters. So this appears to be in this exchange here when Liam says, "Where'd you get that?" I think he's referring to these letters. Let's read these. It's strange to think that this may be the last time I come out this far in the forest. After spending my entire youth running around this place with an abandon, frankly, bordered on stupidity. Guess that's what happens when there's nobody at home who cares enough to keep tabs on you, and a tiny part of you wants to trip into the creek and hit your head on a rock just to show them that they should have. Nevertheless, in a few short weeks, I'm going to be a father. I've got my own family to think about. Being a father means developing a sense of self-preservation for your kid's sake, if not your own. Da-da-dum-bum-bum. Got some light that we can shed on the situation. Let's try that. So this is my goodbye to a place that's been very important to me for many years. Hopefully, once I've got what I have to say off my chest and leave this letter behind me, I can close out this chapter of my life for good. Since I found this place as a teenager, I knew there was something special about it. Special doesn't mean safe, of course, but it does mean fascinating, especially for a precocious and impulsive kid. I stumbled on this strange little hollow by total chance after I'd gotten into some knockdown, drag-out fight with my mother and run away from home, with nothing but a few quarters and an empty lighter in my pockets. The first thing that struck me when I walked in was that outside sound didn't seem to penetrate this hollow at all. No cracking twigs or rustling leaves, only the sound of my own breath. The second thing that struck me was the thing at the center of the place, the twisted, hollow stump of a tree with bark as white as maggots. I remembered Anthony talking about the Blair Witch being tied to a twisted white tree. And then there's something in code. I went over to get a closer look, and when I put my hand on the bark, it was colder than I expected it to be. Then I felt a sharp pain in my palm. I managed to get the most wicked splinter imaginable, and ended up bleeding all over the tree as well as myself. I started to feel numb and lightheaded, and I left. I got home right before sunset. That's one local taboo that I've never once broken. I never will break. Knowing about all the people who'd gone missing after staying out too long was enough to make me make that concession at least. I used to go out to the hollow a few times a week, always in the daytime. I'd write in my journal and while away the hours, which seemed to pass in a matter of minutes out there. One time in the hollow, I wrote a note that I never intended to send to a girl who I knew was miles out of my league. I couldn't bring myself to throw it out or destroy it, but I was too mortified to keep it anywhere that another living soul might be able to find it. So I shoved it to the very back of the hollow hole of this tree. There's another little message in code. I know that doesn't necessarily mean anything, but I still couldn't help but feel as though it did. For a short time after that, this was our spot. Her house wasn't the happiest place to be at the time, what with Jess staying over to deal with her whole ex-husband situation. I'd dare Rosemary to go and find the notes that I wrote for her. She'd find them and leave some of her own for me. I thought that if neither of us had a place to be happy on our own, I could make a place for us to be happy together, from scratch. Maybe it was naive of me to think that there was any place for joy in the forest, after all the tragedy that's taken place there. Rosemary certainly started to think so after a while anyway. But even though she hasn't come out here since high school, I've still visited sometimes, just to look at the remains of our old love notes or to occasionally squirrel away something new in the tree's hollow. I always liked the image of paper, the pulp of a desiccated tree, being buried within a tree that was dead itself. I like the thought of Rosemary's and my love notes returning to the earth, while our bodies are still out in the real world alive. Another passage in code. But the recurring nightmare that I've started to have about this place lately has been enough to scare even me away. Almost every night, I dream that I'm buried underneath that stump. I try to claw my way up, but I never make it to the surface. Ever since I've started having that dream, I felt a stronger something than ever before. More code. Either way, I have a strange feeling that more code. Still going to have to go into the forest sometimes for my livelihood. After all, I've got a family now, and they're going to depend on me for a long time. But I can be careful. I'll keep leaving before sunset. I'll never, ever bring any of this up to Rosemary. She shouldn't have to worry about it, not when she's going to have a new child on her hands so soon. That's the end. So I have 2 different ciphers to crack. And I didn't even finish the one from last week. I should probably try to do that this week too. Some guy asked, what are the chances it's a straight letter substitution in English? I think that's very, very high chances, to be honest. I don't know. I'm not sure which one he's referring to. I just saw this message, but I'm pretty sure that all of these are just a straight letter substitution, i.e., like this might be like the letter B or something like that. I'm gonna check out what one thing that I didn't really get a chance to try in the first one was just to try like offsetting the letters a certain amount. Like I figured out that one of the letters, I think G, probably stood for I. So looking for the most common symbol and assuming that it's E might work. Yeah, absolutely. Some guy. That's exactly right. So that would be a good place to start. And also, like I said, with this one, I'm pretty sure you're not the Blair Witch, and then 2 letters. So that's got to be the word no, right? So that's a good start as well. But now, let's see. It's 5 o'clock. I think we've got time to look through one of these incident reports before I have to go. And then when I come back later tonight, I'm going to take a look at some of these. It's either no or ha. It's true. It could be. Or it could be, what else? So. All right, let's see. Here's one from Anthony Rapiho. So, or Anthony Rapinoe. So these are the incident reports. Some of the weird things that's been going on at the History Museum. We're going to take a look at these now. And then probably after that, we're going to set this aside for a minute. And when we get back, I'm going to try to crack these ciphers. We'll see what we can do. All right. So incident reports. She mentioned there were some weird things happening at the History Museum lately. Last night around 9:15 p.m., I began to hear what sounded like a voice coming from the basement. I was the only staff member on duty. I'd already made sure that the building was clear of patrons. I'm always sure to keep the door to the basement firmly locked. As soon as I managed to convince myself that I imagined the voice the first time, I heard it again. This time I could swear that it said my name. I called out back to it, saying something along the lines of, "Who's there? The museum is closed. You need to leave." I received no response for a long moment, but then I heard what was clearly the sound of laughter echoing up from the basement. At that point, because I was feeling more than a little spooked, I grabbed the heaviest object on my desk as a potential weapon. It was a volume of the encyclopedia. Then I followed the ominous noise to the basement door. When I reached the locked door, I could clearly hear someone or something moving around mere inches behind it. There was a slow, scratching noise, like metal on wood. When I opened the door, all I could see was the empty stairwell leading down into pitch darkness. Then I heard footsteps and shuffling coming from somewhere inside the darkness. I loudly announced that the museum was closed again, that anyone present would have to leave immediately. I was about to call the sheriff. There was no reply, but the sound of footsteps continued and started to head up the stairs toward me. It's when I chucked the encyclopedia down the stairs as hard as I could, slammed the basement door shut, and locked it. Then I phoned the sheriff's office. Deputy Weathers was dispatched and arrived less than 5 minutes later. He looked around the basement, declared that there was nothing there, and made a frankly disparaging comment about my masculinity before leaving. It was only after Deputy Weathers left, when I reluctantly went to retrieve the damaged encyclopedia, that I noticed the below symbols carved into the section of the topmost basement stairs. I photographed the evidence and promptly left the building. And this is the photograph of those symbols, which it's the same. Actually, this word is exactly these two words. See here? These first two words are exactly the same. This, you know what? This might actually be an apostrophe, and not part of the symbol. So this word could be I'm, right? Who are you? I'm. And it could be on this note too, but after the reason I'm thinking that is because the first two words are the same, right? This exact same symbols, but then after that it deviates. It's something to look into. All right, let's see what else is on here. All right, we got another incident report. Description of individual. I only got a quick glimpse of the individual from behind. It was a male around 6'2" in height. Difficult to tell because he was slouching very heavily. He was wearing a long, filthy coat and mud-stained boots. He moved with a loping gait. About 2 hours ago, at around 10 p.m., I witnessed an unknown individual trespassing in the museum. I was searching through the attic storage section, looking for anything that we might want to include in the upcoming Civil War and Burkittsville exhibit, when I felt something strange happen. The air in the room seemed to become drastically colder all of a sudden. I was overcome with the sinking feeling that I wasn't alone. And I turned around and I saw that, in fact, there was someone crouching down about 5 feet away from me, rifling through a storage cabinet. His back was turned to me, but I gasped loudly when I saw him, and it was clear from his body language he knew that I was there. When the stranger heard me gasp, he slowly stood up. Then he just walked away, not turning around or acknowledging me at all. He climbed down the attic stairs, and fearing for my safety and frankly unable to move, I made zero attempt to pursue him. I huddled in a corner of the attic, clutching an antique bayonet. Called the sheriff's office, remained where I sat until Deputy Weathers arrived. Weathers searched the museum up and down 3 times alongside me. We didn't find any evidence of the man I had seen. We also didn't find any sign of breaking and entering. All possible entrances to the museum were locked when we searched them. Deputy Weathers then had the nerve to threaten to write me up for wasting police resources. After Weathers left, I went to check on the storage cabinet the intruder had been looking through. It's mostly dedicated to oral transcription of 19th and 20th century folk tales. Also contains a few samples of jewelry and other apparel from the time period. After cross-referencing the cabinet's contents with our inventory, I can confirm that nothing was stolen from the cabinet. However, it appears that one item has been added to it. It appears to be a talisman made from sticks and twine, shaped roughly like a human figure. Objects like this have occasionally appeared around town close to the time of an unexplained death or disappearance. I'm going to go home now. I'm going to take a personal day tomorrow. It was very creepy. I wonder if it's the same person in both incidents. Let's look at this one too. I think we have time to read through this one, but probably not this long one. All right, so there's a feedback form from the Burkittville History Museum, customer feedback. My family drove out to your museum from 3 counties over after seeing the glowing write-up of your establishment in Untold Tales magazine, thinking that we'd have a nice weekend outing and learn something along the way. While we were waylaid by some car trouble that stalled us by a few hours, tire blew out as we were driving through the road that goes along the edge of the forest. It took me a long time to install a spare to keep in our trunk. We still arrived with ample time to take a quick look through the museum, or so we thought. Per the information listed directly outside the building itself, we arrived 1 full hour before closing. Why then was the building already locked at the time? Why was I forced to explain to my 2 temperamental children that it was time to turn around and go all the way back home? To make matters worse, as I knocked on the door to the building, I saw an employee standing not 10 feet away from us. He was facing away from me, hunched over a book or something, but he straightened up as soon as I knocked on the door, so he obviously heard me. However, he didn't even turn around. He just calmly walked away through some door without even acknowledging our presence. I have never witnessed such baffling rudeness in my entire life. I'm going to leave your establishment a scathing review on 5 Square, and I will never take my family to this sad excuse for a town again. What the hell, Anthony? This was filed on a Saturday. Unacceptable behavior. I've put up with your eccentricities for a long time, but if they're going to start negatively affecting guest relations, then I'll have no choice but to throw the book at you, so to speak. See me in my office as soon as you get in. Rosie, this complaint was filed by a museum guest exactly 1 week before Liam went missing. I don't know who it was those people say they saw that day, but it wasn't me. It couldn't have been. I've been closing the museum 2 hours early every Saturday for the past 6 months. I'm a member of this historical reenactment band, and it's the only time people are willing to practice. I play bugle for the Union Army. It's a stupid reason to cut work, but nobody ever noticed it until now because I'm the only employee on duty Saturdays because museum attendance is so low across the board. The entire place was locked up when they saw this man, whoever he was, and none of our alarms were tripped at any point that day. He shouldn't have been able to get inside. He shouldn't have been there. But they saw him, clear as day. Up until now, it was just me that was witnessing this kind of presence in the building, but this proves that I'm not just seeing things. I didn't tell Joseph or the sheriff about any of this because I was already in enough trouble as it was, and I can't afford to lose this job. It was stupid of me to stay quiet. I'm so sorry. I hope you can forgive me. So there's a good chance, well, a reasonable chance that the person in these letters might be the person that Anthony Rapinoe saw several times at the Burkittville History Museum. But who is that person? We have to figure that out. We still got to go through this. And the big thing that we have to do is decipher those coded messages. So I'm going to let this sort of marinate for a little bit in my brain. And we're going to come back to this after dark, see if we can't at least start cracking the code.